This book is Taran Hunt's debut novel. If you're looking for a fast-paced, epic sci-fi involving sword fights in outer space and a lot of tidbits around alien cultures and traditions, this is the book for you. Hi, I'm Maria from Read Fine Books, and today we are talking about The Immortality Thief by Taran Hunt. And don't worry, even if this book is part of a series, all the major loose ends are tied up by the time you finish, so you have no problem sleeping at night. I was really glad about that, and I will patiently await for the second book because I so like this one. So, let's get into it. We are in a somewhat distant future with a crew on an important mission. The crew members are on this mission voluntarily to gain a full pardon because the alternative is life in prison or active service in the military. And the mission involves them retrieving data from an abandoned ship very near a star that's at the end of its life. So, piece of cake, right? Of course not. This is only the beginning of the books. It's also the beginning of these people's troubles. They obviously accept the deal. They have to. When they first refuse, because they actually first refuse, the offer sounds too good to be true, they are implanted with a bomb at the base of their necks, which is set to explode if they don't go on this trip to retrieve this important data. But before we dive into their mission and what happens there, we need to discuss a few details of this interesting world. What is the political context, the cultural context in the Immortality Thief? For one, there are two political systems that are in active conflict, Maria Nova and Terra Nova, which is now called the Republic. The two systems compete in technology as well. The Republic seems to be populated by descendants of humans. The Maria Nova system is, however, controlled by the ministers, who are a deadly alien race, came out of nowhere a few hundred years ago and subjugated the entire humanity. Other than that, there are a few independent planets like Keystrom, who was caught in the war between the ministers and the Republic, and who actually fell to the ministers after their deadly short attacks on the planet. Another thing that's important for the plot is that 1,000 years ago, after the first ministerial war, the ministers that came into power in these sister systems purged old languages and imposed sister language, a standardized language for the both systems, and that is the language spoke today after 1,000 years from the first war. There is also another thing that happened 1,000 years ago, a series of experiments, because before the ministers had arrived, humanity was at their peak in knowledge, in discoveries, in technological advancements, and they had performed a series of experiments in order to obtain immortality. And those experiments are called the Philosopher's Stone experiments. They are said to have actually discovered the secret to eternal life. However, those discoveries were lost once the ministers arrived because it is said they destroyed them to ensure that humanity remained under their control. So we have some interesting experiments. We have ministers who control knowledge. We have the Republic, which is the humanity now. So now we dive into this important mission. Who are the members of the crew that go to the abandoned ship? The first and most important one is Shan Ren. He is a Kistrian linguist that watched all his family die. In Kistrom, there was an attack on a city, Ithaca, The attack was done by the ministers. They actually burned the city to the ground and afterwards took control of the planet without anyone opposing them. And this happened because practically the Republic had abandoned the planet completely in the hands of the ministers. Shan Ren now is not a fan of the ministers and not a fan of the Republic either. He, along Benny, go into this mission without wanting to. Their boss's representative Quint is along with them, and as I said, Leah, whom they don't really know. But he's the most important one because he's the only one who knows actually old languages that aren't in use anymore, because the only language in use right now is the sister standard, which had been imposed by the ministers long time ago. And Shan Ren is really gifted with his linguistic knowledge, and I loved how how Taran Hunt shows his talent through the way he thinks about different things through his love of languages perspective. These are small things that actually made the book better. I'll give you a little quote to show you how he actually thinks, and a thing that I really enjoyed in throughout this book. Flying a ship was like speaking a foreign language. There were all these strict rules to follow to get the grammar right, but so long as you had the gist of it intact, you could make it up on the fly and be pretty well understood. And yes, Shanren flies spaceships as well. So, what of their data? So, the crew actually reaches this spaceship, and what they find out is that the important data they want to retrieve is the data surrounding the Philosopher's Stone experiments. So, everything around immortality. And this is where the troubles begin, because on this abandoned ship, though it's supposed to be empty as it had been there alone for 1,000 years, it's full of creatures belonging to these experiments, and they have to retrieve the data going through all of these creatures and avoiding them or battling them, and that is quite an adventure. And of course, they have to, because this important data can influence the fate of the war between the Republic and the ministers. However, what they also find out is that there is another girl there on the ship that seems to be human. And what is up with that? Who's the girl? I'm not gonna spoil it, but long story short, they need her to get the data as well. And apparently, the ship is also not so secret anymore, because an entire crew of ministers comes here as well, and these ministers quickly capture the entire crew, and they use Shan Ren to navigate the ship as well, because of course the ship has all its data and controls in Ameng, a language dead for 1,000 years, and Shanren is the only one able to speak it. So, not so secret ship, not so lonely ship, because it is teeming with creatures. The only one to speak its language is Shanren, and they all set out together on this journey. Apparently, the data is in the captain of the ship's cabin, so they head there and their adventure begins. This is a very fast paced journey, and along with the creatures there, we discover also more and more data on the Philosopher's Stone experiments. We discover Shan Ren's past, And the idea behind those experiments was exhilarating to read about. I finished the book in just a few days, though it's quite large, and I also loved the way the author views languages. I loved how it shows the way to respectfully approach a different culture. It reminded me a lot of Andy Weir's um, Project Hail Mary around that subject. So that was just perfect. What I would have loved more is that humanity's descendants be a little more different than they are today. It seems weird that 1,000 years go by and not only they are still very religious, they practically worship kind of the same god as we do. It is not stated that way specifically, but we get the name of the one that bled for us. So I don't know, there are things that i i I hope in 1,000 years will evolve differently, but I kind of understand if they don't. And it is always amazing to me how authors view our future. The more different it is, the more interesting it is. And that is why I was a bit disappointed. This future is not that different than what is generally expected. What I actually enjoyed the most was getting to know Chandran and his memories surrounding his burned city, his family, um, along with discovering new things on the ship. We discover his past. There are chapters dedicated to the journey, chapters dedicated to its past, and the blending made everything very interesting. It piqued my curiosity a bit more. It made me understand why he acts the way he does, though he is a bit perfect, right? Because he approaches, for example, ministers with the kind of respect he doesn't really owe them after they burn their city down. He dissociates the ministers that burned his city from the ministers that are here controlling his crew. He approaches these ones as distinct persons, and this is something a good-natured person would do. However, seeing that this nation burned your city, it is actually in real life very hard to achieve. I can't imagine a person that would be so open-minded about these kind of people. So I have some mixed feelings about this. On the one hand, yes, I love to see this in a book. It's inspiring. On the other hand, I don't feel it's realistic at all. I think it would have been just as better to create more of an arc for the Shanren character, in which she passes from hate to understanding the ministers better. And the way it was written here, it was just too perfect to be true. So maybe we'll have a more complex, not so perfect Shanren in the second book. Who knows? The cruise journey is just exhilarating, battling different creatures, uh, facing your fears, and the plot twists in the end are so good. I think the author's love of languages really shows here more than anything. If you want to spend an awesome fun afternoon reading around different cultures, languages, just having a fun adventure, yes, reading this book is just perfect. I'm Maria from Read Fine Books. Thank you so much for watching.